Waiting for the signal. Welcome to you all at this year's Portal. Have a seat, have a seat. And we're getting started with our first keynote, and it's a I'm very honored to introduce Mika Pohjlola in Budapest, one of the most renowned personalities in this field, in the field of LARP and immersive experiences. And he'll going to Renowned, as it is known. Yes, thanks for clearing that up. He'll introduce our topic of roots for today. And that's going to be the main theme of Friday. We're going to explore the roots, the histories, and the inspirations of LARP.
Hello, Budapest. Woo! Let's get right into it. So this talk is an attempt to solve a 2,300-year-old mystery by using tools provided to us by LARP, as well as ancient theater plays, wall mosaics from the ruins of Pompeii, contemporary archaeology and anthropology, 19th century philological essays, media studies, hieroglyphics, and the study of rituals. The mystery is this: what was the chorus in the tragedies of classical Greece? Aristotle could not figure it out, and neither has anyone since then. But they were not LARPers. First of all, I acknowledge that this presentation is an all-male panel, but I work with the historical record, which unfortunately is very, very masculine. I couldn't help that. Most of contemporary Western storytelling, from Hollywood films to epic novels, is based on theories built upon Aristotle's poetics. You have the audience, the spectator, the reader, you. You have the story being told. The president saves his family. We follow the survival of generations of one family through the troubles of the 20th century. This presentation. And the medium through which it is told. Movie, book, me speaking, showing you slides. By the creators, the filmmakers, the novelist, myself. This, it has long been believed, fits in perfectly with what Aristotle wrote about the tragedies of Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. You have the people on their seats in the amphitheater, the audience, watching a play based on Greek mythology or history, the story, being played by 1 to 3 actors who wear masks, the medium, and the script for all this is written by the poet, the creator. However, there is an element in Aristotle's description of Attican tragedy that he cannot explain, and which we tend to ignore: the chorus. Aristotle was the first of many theorists who have tried and failed to explain the chorus. The chorus cannot be explained within Aristotle's framework because Aristotle supposes the chorus exists for the benefit of the audience. I propose that the chorus is not meant for the audience at all. By looking at the chorus as a participatory act for the people in the chorus, this part of Greek storytelling begins to make sense. Attican tragedy from 500 to 300 BCE, before current era. So that's 2,500 years ago to 2,300 years ago. It consisted of 1 to 3 actors and a chorus of up to 50 men. The actors would wear masks, play different characters, and recite dialogue and monologues written by the poet, who was the writer, director, composer, producer, organizer of the tragedy. The members of the chorus, also called the tragic dancers, would also wear masks and play a group of some sort, such as the elders or the women. Sometimes the chorus could also have dialogue with one or more characters. Now, Attica was the area around Athens. So Attican tragedy, that's the red part. So Attican tragedy basically means tragedies performed in and around Athens. Tragedies typically premiered at the religious city Dionysia festival as part of the games. Awards were given for the group with the best play. After that, the poet, actors, props, masks, and the set would be packed on carts to go on tour, playing their tragedies all around the ancient world. They were musicians on tour, or LARP organizers setting up events in strange lands. Whether the 50 tragic dancers of the chorus had their own carts is something that is rarely discussed. But having done tours like this, it seems to me more feasible to recruit them locally. During the 200 years of Attican tragedy, the chorus, as well as tragedy as a whole, went through drastic changes. And analyzing anything at the end of that era might not provide great insight into how things were at the beginning of it. The function of the chorus may have ranged from a frenzied ritual to a narrator, from a musical song and dance troupe to an actor. Let us review some theories to gain an understanding of what scholars have said about the chorus before this. Poetics is a transcription of Aristotle's lectures on writing tragedies, probably put together by one of his students around 335 before current era. These would probably have been fairly recent lectures within the last few decades. However, the tragedies Aristotle uses as his example all premiered 70 to 164 years before the publication of Poetics, and 22 to 115 years before he was born. So Aristotle had no first-hand experience of them at the time. Tragedy was very much a new form of art, much like cinema is today. If one imagines trying to analyze the black and white silent films of Chaplin or Eisenstein based on only having seen remakes of them with full color, surround sound, 48 frames per second, and 3D, one can perhaps grasp at the difficulty Aristotle must have had making exact analyses of the plays of Aeschylus. Now, this is what Aristotle writes about the chorus in Poetics. The chorus, too, should be regarded as one of the actors. It should be an integral part of the whole and share in the action in the manner not of Euripides, but of Sophocles. Albert Weiner has discussed this chapter in 1980. He points out that not all of Sophocles' choruses are dramatic either, or in any way take the plot forward. Using Oedipus Rex as an example, he points out, either Aristotle is dead wrong when, referring to Oedipus Rex as the model tragedy, he suggests that the chorus should be regarded as one of the actors, as is clearly the case with Aeschylus' tragedies, or our interpretation or translation of the Poetics is wrong. Our test of the dramaticness of Oedipus Rex has shown it to be a total failure. Now, if Albert Weiner continues, if Aristotle did not mean that the tragic chorus should be regarded as a collective character, what did he mean? Perhaps the first clue that the reinterpretation of this point is necessary is the very fact that he has said so little about the chorus. It would seem that because the chorus's lines, in even the least choric tragedies, comprise such a large portion of the total lines, that Aristotle would have devoted at least a proportionate space to it in the Poetics. Now, even if Weiner was right in explaining Aristotle, this does not really help us to get what Aristotle might have thought the chorus was, except in the sense that it was or was not a part of the story, and it should be designed with care to assist in winning the dramatic competition. But let us now look at other attempts at explaining the chorus. One of the key texts would have been a prose treatise on the chorus by Sophocles himself, but unfortunately that has been lost in time. In 19 before current era, roughly 2,000 years ago, the Roman poet Horace wrote a long poem, Ars Poetica, about writing drama. He gives much advice on style, originality, tradition, and many other things, but also on chorus. The chorus should play an actor's part energetically and not sing between the acts unless it advances and is also closely related to the plot. It should favor the good and give friendly advice, guide those who are angered, encourage those fearful of sinning, praise the humble table's food, sound laws and justice, and peace with her wide open gates. It should hide secrets and pray and entreat the gods, that the proud lose their luck and the wretched regain it. Horace wrote in a time of revival of classical Greek tragedy in Rome, centuries after even Aristotle, and after centuries of Roman remakes and adaptations of Greek plays where the chorus was removed. But in Horace's time, the chorus was brought back. However, where Aristotle wrote about the chorus in ambiguity, Horace is dead sure that the function of the chorus is to sing songs, make commentary on the plot, and help the audience pass judgment on the characters. So the function of the chorus by Horace's time, at least according to him, was 100% related to the way the audience saw it. Like Aristotle, Horace also frowns upon extra stage numbers, where the chorus is used during interludes for singing songs unrelated to the plot. However, these may well have served a function for the chorus, if not for the audience. It seems that during Horace's time, the chorus was less like a chorus of Greek tragedy and more like a song and dance group of contemporary dance theater, contemporary musical theater. Now, let us fast forward some 1800 years to August Wilhelm von Schlegel. He was a German Romanticist poet and philosopher who in early 19th century wrote about his views on the chorus. Whatever the chorus might be and do in each particular piece, it represented in general first the common mind of the nation and then the general sympathy of all mankind. In a word, the chorus is the ideal spectator. It mitigates the impression of a heart-rending or moving story, while it conveys to the actual spectator a lyrical and musical expression of his own emotions and elevates him to the region of contemplation. Von Schlegel chose a perspective opposite to that of Horace, while staying within the performer-audience paradigm. The chorus is not an actor, but is the ideal spectator, a representative of the audience on the stage. One of his contemporaries was a German called Friedrich Nietzsche, who, before he became a nihilist philosopher, he was a philosopher who wrote about Greek theater. He refutes Schlegel's concept. This view, combined with the historical tradition that originally the tragedy consisted entirely of the chorus, reveals itself for what it is, a crude and unscholarly, although dazzling, claim. For we had always thought that the proper spectator, whoever he might be, must always remain conscious that he has a work of art in front of him, not an empirical reality. Whereas the tragic chorus of the Greeks is required to recognize the shapes on the stage as living, existing people. The chorus of Oceanids really believes that they see the Titan Prometheus in front of them and consider themselves every bit as real as the god of the scene. And was that supposed to be the highest and purest type of spectator? A person who, like the Oceanids, considers Prometheus vitally alive and real? Would it be a mark of the ideal spectator to run up onto the stage and free the god from his torment? I find it interesting that in refuting von Schlegel, Nietzsche comes so close to my own understanding, yet fails to take the final step. Yes, the chorus, like the actors, does pretend to believe everything on stage is true. Yes, they are part of the action and the world presented on stage. Yes, for them it is, in a way, real. From the perspective of the audience, this serves no point. But for the tragic dancers of the chorus, the experience is incredibly powerful. But here, Nietzsche falters. What sort of artistic style would there be which one might derive from the idea of the spectator, for which one might consider the spectator in himself the essential form? What sort of artistic style indeed? One based on participation, not observation. Perhaps participation was out of vogue in Nietzsche's time, but it's very much alive right now. One thing we do know about Greek tragedy with some certainty is that it arose out of rituals. This is agreed upon by historians, is evident in many plays, is showed in surviving ancient visual art, is proven by archaeology, and is also mentioned by Aristotle. Aristotle says, tragedy, as also comedy, was at first mere improvisation. The one originated with the authors of the dithyramb, which was hymns sung and danced in honor of Dionysus, the other with those of the phallic songs, which are still in use in many of our cities. So if tragedy sprung from ritual, what were those rituals like? According to performance scholar Richard Schechner, one cannot always tell performance and ritual apart, and in prehistoric times they may have well been one and the same. He writes in Performance Studies, evidence indicates that people were performing in caves at least 40,000 years ago. What kinds of performances? The words dance, theater, and music, or their linguistic equivalents, are not universal, but the behaviors are. Of course, such behaviors vary from place to place, culture to culture, and epoch to epoch. But surviving cave art and prehistoric artifacts indicate that rhythmic movement, beating of bone-to-bone drums, and flute sounds, wearing masks and costumes while impersonating other humans, animals, or supernaturals were going on. No one knows if these Paleolithic performers were acting out stories or representing past events, experiences, memories, dreams, or fantasies. Schechner's point that all performances are indeed, to some degree, both ritual and entertainment, is useful for one following the development of Attican tragedy, as I shall later show. There is a historical genre directly between ritual and drama, appropriately called ritual drama. Understanding that is key to understanding the origins of Attican tragedy and also LARP. Perhaps the best and certainly the oldest surviving description of a ritual drama is from Egypt. The so-called Abydos Passion Play, which existed from roughly 2500 BCE to 550 BCE, so 2,000 years, for a period of 2,000 years, was contemporary to Dionysian dithyrambs, and which gave birth to Attican tragedy, and also in the same cultural sphere, making the exchange of ideas and practices possible. Here's a map of the Mediterranean. That is Athens, and around it Attica, where the Attican tragedies were performed, and the red parts are the Greece and its colonies. And of course, the Greek cultural influence was much larger. Abydos is here. We will delve further into the Abydos Passion Play shortly. all the rivers that you see, of course, took these cultures forward and might have had tribal people coming to the big cities to see these tragedies or to participate in these rituals. We're here. My native country, Finland, did not fit in this map, unfortunately. Ikernofret was the chief treasurer of Pharaoh Senusret III, and he participated in this event around 1800 before current era. I guess you've all experienced the feeling after a LARP that you want to tell about your character and nobody wants to listen. Ikernofret was no different. He wanted to tell about his character so much that he had it carved on stone with hieroglyphics. Sorry. Here it is. I will read a translation in case you don't know ancient Egypt. I acted as beloved son of Osiris Khentiamentu. I embellished his great bark of eternity. I made for it a shrine which displays the beauties of Khentiamentu in gold, silver, lapis lazuli, bronze, Cessna gem wood, and cedar. I fashioned the gods in his train. I made their shrines anew. I caused the temple priesthood to do their duties. I caused them to know the custom of every day, the festival of the head of the year. I organized the going forth of Wep-Wawet when he proceeded to avenge his father. I drove away the rebels from the Neshmet bark. I overthrew the enemies of Osiris. I celebrated the great going forth. I followed the god at his going and caused the ship to sail, Thoth steering the sailing. I avenged Wennefer that day of the great fight. I overthrew all his enemies upon the sandbanks of Nedit. I caused him to proceed into the great bark. It raised up his beauties. I, making glad the people/tomb owners of the eastern desert, creating joy amongst the people/tomb owners of the western desert. They saw the beauties of the Neshmet bark when it touched land at Abydos, when it brought Osiris Khentiamentu to his palace. I followed the god to his house. I carried out his purification and extended his seat and solved the problems of his residence and amongst his entourage. Still zooming. The Abydos Passion Play was a part of the cult of Osiris, which has many similarities with the cult of Dionysus, to such an extent that the two gods are sometimes considered the same god. Both gods were part human, part god. They were crucified. They had a virgin birth. They died and were resurrected. These characteristics obviously also fit the figure of Jesus Christ, whose worship would emerge many centuries later. Here's a picture of the great barge of the great Neshmet barge of Osiris Khentiamentu, steered by Thoth. Whether Ikernofret is in the picture, I'm not sure. One of the key surviving descriptions of the Abydos Passion Play comes from Greek historian Herodotus, a contemporary of Sophocles and Euripides. The few then who have been left about the image draw a vane with 4 wheels which bears the shrine and the image that is within the shrine. And the other priests standing in the gateway try to prevent it from entering. And the men who are under a vow come to the assistance of the god and strike them, while the others defend themselves. Then there comes to be a hard fight with staves, and they break one another's heads. And I am of opinion that many even die of the wounds they receive. The Egyptians, however, told me that no one died. So that's like the buffer climax of the LARP. Swedish LARP designer Martin Eriksson has written about the Abydos Passion Play in comparison with LARP. According to him, the pharaoh did pretty much the kind of job a megalomaniac LARP organizer would do, with a few thousand slaves and unlimited resources, instead of a guy with a van and a loan from the local role-playing guild. We have no real way of knowing exactly how pre-scripted these ritual plays were. Our scant sources hint that they were set with a scripted core cast at the center of a violently ecstatic crowd. Erickson arrives very close to what I believe the early Attican tragedies were, a scripted core cast of 1 to 3 actors at the center of an ecstatic chorus. It is not unthinkable that the early tragic dances in worships of Dionysus would have been poor man's versions of these grand celebrations of Osiris. Nevertheless, this type of ritual drama would certainly have been familiar to the Greeks. If dithyrambs arose out of rituals or ritual dramas, then how did they differ from other rituals or ritual dramas? What, in fact, were dithyrambs? We know they were connected to at least the cult of Dionysus and likely to other cults as well. The Romans called Dionysus Bacchus, and celebrations of the god Bacchanalia. This word is still used to describe crazy parties similar to the ones that were thrown by the Dionysus followers of old, consisting of sex and wine and loud music like the dithyrambs. Attendees were typically dressed in purple robes or skins of goats, foxes, fawns, or leopards, wearing crowns of laurels on their heads. Masks were used to summon different personae. Ritual objects carried also included staves, scourges, bowls, and drinking cups. Nevertheless, these were not only festivals of the body, far from it. Wine and sex also served as means for getting closer to God. If one compares these religious festivals to contemporary rock festivals, an attendant might enjoy sex and intoxicants at both. But at Dionysiac rituals, there would also be a more spiritual element. Becoming one with your God, seeing your favorite artist, experiencing symbolic death and rebirth, singing along to well-known songs among hundreds of other celebrants, having an epiphany. A major part of Dionysiac rituals were the dithyrambs. They were ecstatic narrative songs with a special rhythm, danced to by large groups of celebrants called a chorus or a tragic dance, which means goat dance. The chorus consisted of 50 men or boys dancing in a circle, sometimes dressed as or wearing the mask of satyrs. Typically, each dithyramb had a story related to the life, death, or rebirth of Dionysus, or some other hero or god. They were accompanied by a flute known as the aulos, which you can see in this Roman mosaic excavated from Pompeii. There's also a box of masks. It is not impossible to think that sometimes trumpets, drums, bull roarers, and cymbals were also used to accompany the dithyramb to make the dancing even wilder. There's no indication that this was a performative dance like the ballet, as an audience is never mentioned. Since it was a religious ritual, it was quite probably more of an experiential dance, such as bashing your head at the mosh pit of a heavy metal concert, or raving into a trance at a techno party, or waltzing with your loved one at a seaside restaurant. The key difference between singing and dancing to dithyrambs and Attican tragedy is that one is more of a private ritual and the other more of a public spectacle. That is to say, tragedy had an audience. As Richard Schechner pointed out, there is no clear division between ritual and performance. Similarly, there is no clear division between being a member of the ritual audience or being a ritual participant. And yet they are different. Nevertheless, we know that at least the initiation rituals of Dionysus worship happened in secret. So clearly, not all of it was meant for an audience to observe, but only for the initiates to participate in. There were also Dionysian rituals that were meant for the public, such as a procession through the Polish streets carrying phalloi, goat penises. We also know that Attican tragedy was performed at amphitheaters, so clearly it had at least many components that were meant for an audience to observe. Possibly in the beginning, tragedies had more participatory elements and later on evolved into being more performances and less rituals, also meaning more friendly for a passive audience and involving less participation. Greek legends tell of the musician Arion, who invented dithyramb as a literary composition for the chorus around 600 years before our current era. Having pre-written songs open up the possibility of giving repeat performances of a similar nature and created a new role, the poet. In this case, the poet would write the lyrics and the music, conduct and direct the chorus, be their producer and manager, and play the aulos or the lyre. Soon after this, big religious festivals really became a thing in Greece. They had already had the Olympic Games every 4 years. But between 582 and 573, they were complemented by 3 other such events, making games an annual thing. Games included athletic competitions like the Olympic Games today, but also ritual dramas comparable to those at Abydos, giant banquets, and cultural competitions such as singing hymns, playing instruments, painting, and eventually singing dithyrambs. Comparisons with the Eurovision or Portal LARP conferences, also rotating between different places, are tempting. Dithyramb competitions were introduced into the Athens Games sometimes between 561 and 534 BCE. At a dithyramb competition, each tribe would enter 2 groups of dancers, choruses, and one of men and one of boys. Each chorus would be led by a coryphaeus, serving a role similar to Arion above. The choruses would dance and sing in ecstasy and be observed by an audience and a jury. The winner would receive a goat as a prize. How intoxicated or enthusiastic the chorus or the leader or the audience was, we don't know. Now, this was a period of rapid cultural evolution, and the jury might naturally reward external performance over participatory immersion, since they could only observe the former. Some could say that the jury system was rigged. I let that sink in. Having a tragic chorus dance in front of an audience is not a theater play. It is similar to putting LARP on stage and hoping people get it. But 100 years later, it had evolved into theater. According to another legend, a poet named Thespis introduced an actor with a prologue and pre-written monologues and gave the actor several masks so he could play several characters. From a LARP perspective, this would be similar to having the game master put on a funny hat and play supporting characters to take the action forward. From a theater perspective, this would be similar to finally having an actor that also speaks to the audience. From Thespis' name, we get the synonym for actor, thespian. Aeschylus, the next big innovator, first competed with his tragedies in 499 BCE. He was active for almost 50 years and made many great inventions, which Aristotle describes thus. Aeschylus first introduced a second actor. He diminished the importance of the chorus and assigned the leading part to the dialogue. We're getting closer to theater. What does this mean for the chorus? According to Aristotle, their importance was diminished. But the Poetics was written over 100 years after these events. So it is possible that Aristotle did not fully capture the meaning of the second actor for the chorus. Certainly they would have had less to do if they stand around while Dionysus and the king of Thebes are having a long conversation. No dancing or singing is necessary or even welcome. From the perspective of the audience, the chorus might sometimes seem even superfluous, like watching a Disney movie. Why is the story constantly interrupted by singing? But from the point of view of the chorus, things can seem quite different. They are still participating in a festival in honor of the god Dionysus. They have a distinct role in the story. They have a presence in most scenes, even if they don't actively do anything. They do, however, play characters that are at the center of the action, perhaps interacting with each other in a subdued way, commenting on the action of the main characters, and definitely experiencing it all as if they were there, because they were. For them, King of Thebes is not Aeschylus wearing a mask he made last night, he is the King of Thebes. The final innovation described in Poetics came from the poet Sophocles, who started about 30 years after Aeschylus and still over 100 years before Aristotle. Sophocles raised the number of actors to 3 and added scene painting, credits Aristotle. According to Aristotle, Sophocles' Oedipus Rex was the highest achievement in tragedy, and it is indeed still performed today. Some 20 years later, after that highest achievement, the golden age of tragedy and of Athens came to an end. Euripides and Sophocles both died around 406 BCE, Aeschylus having passed away earlier. The gradual decline of the chorus was in progress, and soon the chorus would disappear altogether from contemporary tragedies. And after this, Aristotle gave his lectures on poetics. And thus, over 2,000 years ago, participation mutated into performance and spectatorship. Now, let us return to Nietzsche's question from the beginning. What sort of artistic style would there be which one might derive from the idea of the spectator, for which one might consider the spectator in himself the essential form? I suggested any participatory art might fulfill that demand. Nietzsche would perhaps not have been satisfied with this answer. He said, the spectator without a play is a contradictory idea. Well, a participant in a LARP could easily be considered a spectator without a play. And the whole medium of LARP and artistic style derived from the idea of the spectator in himself. Indeed, the term first-person audience has become commonplace in describing the feeling of being immersed in the story and the character, and seeing everything as if you're really there. Polish theater director Jerzy Grotowski used these words to describe his attempts at participatory theater. In the ritual, the montage takes place in the minds of the doers. That is another way of saying first-person audience. Similarly, perhaps a tragic dancer in a chorus could be a first-person audience for the events of the tragedy. If all performances are indeed to some degree both ritual and entertainment, and all experiences are to some degree both passive and participatory, it is impossible to find a specific point in time when ritual dithyrambs for participants turn into artistic tragedies for spectators. Even trying to find such a point becomes meaningless. We do not know at which point tragedy became a spectator sport, but since Thespis added an actor and a prologue in the latter half of the 6th century BCE, it is clear that the tragic dances were already performed for the audience at that point. My proposition is that around 550 to 500 BCE, the experience for the people in the chorus was that of a participatory ritual, much like a LARP. And the experience for the people in the seats of the amphitheater was that of a passive audience observing a combination between ritual and entertainment. But 200 years later, when Aristotle's Poetics was published, the experience for the people in the chorus was closer to that of actors performing a play, and the experience for the audience was very similar to passive audiences of theater and film entertainment today. This would mean that at some point during those 200 years, there was a shift in tradition. Now, based on over 2 decades of work in the field of participatory art, it is not fruitful to observe participation from the outside. It's not meant to look interesting. It's meant to feel interesting. Therefore, to understand rituals, a participatory experience, we must ask what it feels like to take part in one. Schechner writes, "Play gives people a chance to temporarily experience the taboo, the excessive, and the risky. You may never be Oedipus or Cleopatra, but you can perform them in play. Ritual and play lead people into a second reality, separate from ordinary life. This reality is one where people can become selves other than their daily selves." Schechner's friend, anthropologist Victor Turner, also wrote a lot about rituals based on extensive field work among tribal societies. He says rituals are characterized by liberation of human capacities of cognition, affect, volition, creativity from the normative constraints. So individuals participating in a ritual are no longer bound by their everyday identities, their social statuses, their families, their sex, gender, nationality, age, caste, or class. They absorb a new liminal identity for the duration of the ritual and relate to each other through that identity. The new role can be celebrant, man, woman, god, bull, ancestor, forest spirit, or anything else. Elven paladin. But the other participants have a similar role and only see each other through that role. Now, as one of the most developed contemporary participatory art forms, the practice of LARP shows what participation and liminal experiences can feel like. But they also provide another useful perspective on rituals. LARPs allow the participant to experience personalities, lives, cultures, and events from dozens of perspectives, and even participate in rituals while pretending to believe they're true, like some of us did just now. Experimenting with and experiencing different sorts of rituals provides one with some tools for understanding actual rituals as well. The chorus serves many functions. The function may have been different for the tragic dancers in the chorus, for the audience, for the poet, for the actors, and for the jury of the dramatic competitions. It clearly changed over time from a participatory ritual to a performance meant for the audience. And Aristotle may have been instrumental in hastening this transformation. Nevertheless, even today, performance, and especially performing, shares attributes with ritual. Only analyzing chorus from the perspective of the audience or the jury, as Aristotle does, automatically leaves out a major part of the importance of the chorus. The chorus had aspects of first-person audience and participation, which are shared more by ritual than by theater. Today, these aspects live on in participatory media, including transmedia, LARPs, improvisation, jam sessions, multiplayer digital games, and rap battles. To better understand and develop these recent and emerging media, it is useful to look at what has been done before. Similarly, the practice of these contemporary ritual dramas provides unique insight to the chorus 2,500 years ago, such that was not available to earlier researchers. The chorus lives on, and the roots of LARP go beyond history. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation and forest creatures of Portal. Let me just bear with me for a little while before I let you out and, photosynthesize a little bit. And maybe get some black water and normal water as well. Just a few things about the upcoming program. And we're still ahead of time. And in fact, we actually won 15 more minutes. So our next session is going to begin 12:30, and it's going to be our first breakout session in which we'll have 4 elements. The first one, and this is when I'm going to also say hi to those of you who are listening online. Though the first item is going to be the social contract of LARPing by Sándor Mesterházy, and that item is going to be held here. And it's going to be about expectation management and player experience and the social contract. In the Nymphs Nook, which is our room directly above us on the 2nd floor, a very interesting LARP-based card game is going to be presented by David Kara, Necronome. It's going to be a workshop where you have a presentation and you have a chance to see the rules of Necronome. At the Windy Treetop, we'll have a talk and a workshop about LARP from the the tabletop role players' perspective by Yusuf. To LARP or not to LARP? That is the question. The 4th one is going to be in the Glowing Glades. Both of these are on the 3rd floor. And that's presented by Zbigniew Januszkowicz. And it's about LARP projects within the Erasmus framework. Dear Erasmus, do you play for LARP experience? That is the question. So these are going to be our next breakout sessions. And let me tease you with one program that's going to start after our lunch break. Well, Mika kicked off the theme of roots for us, and we're going to continue in that vein from 2:30 onwards with an opening of an exhibition about Hungarian traditions of a fantasy children's camp, the Alliance of the Known Realms. And that the realms are going to be opening up in the King's Grove, which is at the very bottom of our enchanted forest. That's where the roots are starting from. Yes, one practical announcement is that the Green Dragon's Lair is only opening up tomorrow. So Green Dragon's Lair, indeed. So thank you, forest creatures. And now, let's gather up back in here in a little while, 12:30. All right?